All right, let's get into it. Welcome today. Our conversation is all about enterprise GitOps, specifically this idea of how you can take those practices of GitOps and expand them beyond a single cluster, beyond a single environment, and do this at a scale for hundreds or thousands of application teams across many different regions, clusters, and environments, and do that while maintaining the security, the consistency, and the developer experience needed to ultimately succeed. My name is Eddie Webbinaro. I'm your host today. I am a sales engineer here with Akuity. I've got about 20 years experience in the CI/CD DevOps area. I'm actually hired my first DevOps engineer around 2010. Been doing CI pipelines since 2007. I love this stuff, right? So I'm really excited to be here with Akuity and talking to you all about the opportunity to apply GitOps at scale. A few housekeeping items. I do have just one or two intro slides, but the bulk of today's conversation is going to be a live demonstration of the platform. Along the way, if you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can plug those questions in. I'm going to queue them up to the end of the conversation today, but we'll make sure we have some time to get to those most popular questions as they come up. Meanwhile, there is a chat box. Feel free to go ahead and drop in there where you're dialing in from and what role you are to get the conversation started. All right, so when we talk about enterprise software delivery, right, GitOps for the enterprise, this is not just a future-looking aspirational statement for Acuity. We are the original founders of Argo and Cargo. So Hong, Jesse, and Alex created this offering almost 10 years ago now, and that was acquired by Intuit to help them solve their challenge of scaling Kubernetes adoption to 10,000 plus applications. Argo CD now is the world's most popular solution for GitOps. It's used by over 60% of organizations who have deployed Kubernetes. And Acuity's, our customer base is over 70% enterprise customers, and we have these customers running at massive scale. One of our customers is actually running a single Argo CD controller with over 40,000 application instances deployed on it. And we've got several customers running, more than 10,000 plus applications. So this idea of GitOps at scale has been proven and battle tested across the industry. We've got customers in finance, commerce, asset management, across the board. We are serving all sorts of different use cases, anyone that has that software delivery challenge. Who's today's conversation for? Most of the folks that I talk to in my day-to-day work are centralized platform teams or those central cloud teams, infrastructure teams that are tasked with creating this consistent and uniform deployment model, standardization that enforces all the policies laid on them by GRC and security teams. Meanwhile, they're tasked to reduce the burden and cost of CI/CD deployment processes. And of course, they're always tasked with this idea of developer experience, right? How can we create a better developer experience? And so if you are an application developer who's looking for that set and forget pipeline, I don't want to know how everything works. I just want to get my application into the environments it needs to get to. I'll focus on the application logic. Those app developers, they need fast feedback, they need automated verification, and they want this self-service model without taking on all the complexity of underlying infrastructure, right? I shouldn't need to be an expert in Kubernetes and AWS or Azure or GCP in order to ship my Node.js application. And of course, all this is serving the goals of the business, right? But at the end of the day, what does the business want? They want speed and reliability. And we can help you deliver that with faster release cycles, increased reliability, and the kind of visibility that your stakeholders need, be it the QA team or your senior executives. Ultimately, we're helping you meet this ever increasing goal of better, faster, cheaper. I mentioned platform teams being the most common role that I interact with in conversations, and this slide highlights some of the challenges or pain points that those engineers often express to us. And so I'll actually have Austin pull up a poll here because one thing I like to do in prospecting conversations is pull up this slide and ask the audience, hey, which one of these problems or two of these problems are most acute for your organization? And the reason that I love this slide is because it kind of starts with a very quick gut reaction. Oh, it's three, it's five, it's seven, it's one. And then especially if we have multiple stakeholders in the conversation, they very quickly start to add to that list. Oh, and eight, and two, and four. And the end of a 40-second conversation, they've probably identified every single one of the items on this list because it is a little bit of a cheat here. I mean, these are common problems that we're all dealing with. But if you could just take a look at this poll and quickly tick off, what are those top one, two, three items that your team is facing right now when you look at these platform challenges? And we'll give it just a minute here for folks to participate. While they're doing that, there is a quick question. Will folks receive the deck after this event? Absolutely. We'll make sure that the recording of this conversation will be available for those to look at afterwards, and you can share that. All right. Hopefully, we've got some good numbers coming in on the poll. We can go ahead and close that out, and we'll keep the conversation moving. Now, across these challenges I showed on the previous slide, we've got the numbers up here. Um, and as expected, kind of looking at these challenges are pretty consistent across the board. We've got a good sampling, right? The challenges of architecting at scale, stakeholder visibility, governance, drift detection, integrations, costs, we're all struggling from these challenges. And we see those challenges emerge because what we often see organizations is they start with a CI process, building and testing their artifacts, and they continue to add complexity to that process over time, taking on more and more deployment and orchestration and verification capabilities. And those pipelines or processes end up become loaded with fragile scripts and become a very complex and fragile process overall. And then that leads to teams being reluctant to make changes. It leads to um, a struggle or a slowness in order to adapt changes. And we actually see a number of organizations who still have lots of manual processes because the complexity and risk is so high in this area. They're concerned about completely handing that over to automation because something ends up always, going wrong. The Akuity platform is really aimed at solving this promotion and deployment side challenges, right? So we offer Argo CD, again, the world's most popular GitOps solution out there. Our offering 100 times more scalable than the open source solution, also more secure based on its unique architecture. And that's really handling the deployment orchestration. Cargo is letting you take that across many different environments, many different clusters, many different regions with our promotion engine. And this is policy-driven promotion tooling where you get that security, that consistency that you need, along with exposing self-service access to your application teams. And ultimately, we still need to be handling our day two operations moving forward. And that's where the platform overall, along with our Akuity Intelligence agents, are helping you automatically detect and remediate situations in your environment, be they incidents or questions from your application teams, and giving you the insights that you and your stakeholders need in order to effectively operate these environments, dealing with all those various integrations you have as part of the DevOps ecosystem. All right, so let's get into the demo. Intro slides out of the way. Really want to make sure that we're talking about the value we can deliver to organization. I worked with a colleague a long time ago that had this great analogy that a good demo should always be like a cooking show, and it starts with the finished product. And so, we're going to open the scene here with the finished cake that we're going to be baking today. And what that really looks like for you as a platform team is enabling your application teams to ship value quickly. So what I want to do quickly to start the conversation, and then we'll go back and do a second pass of the ingredients and recipes, is let's help an application team really quickly ship some value today. So we're going to go from nothing to prod in a 5-minute window here. The first thing, just to keep me honest, we're going to use a random word generator here. Pick a random word. It's going to be tissue. I've got an app out here. We'll make sure, actually, I don't have an app out here yet. Looking at the environment, nothing doing. So let's go ahead and help this application team get their application into the hands of our users really quickly. I'm using a GitHub template here in order to handle this today. Most likely what you would do is use an IDP like Port or Cortex or Backstage or even some internal tool that you've built up in your organization in order to help application teams effectively provision this service. I'm just going to go ahead and create my own repository here using that tissue random word. I'm going to go ahead and spin it up. This is going to create a repository for me based on that platform teams template. And we'll see what that looks like in just a minute. I basically got my concerns as an application team here, my Docker file and my application logic, and then a directory provided by the platform team. And within this file, there's a few key values that we're going to let the application team control. First, they're going to tell us where is that application deployed out to. And so in this case, I'm just using a repository, GitHub's container registry right within this local repository. We're also going to let them configure things like how much memory and CPU does this application need? Where are we going to be exposing this out on the internet? And so we, as a platform team here, have kind of set up some templates and given the application team just enough control to customize what they need to customize. They don't need to be experts in Kubernetes or other systems in our environment in order to just kind of spin up the applications that are appropriate here. And then, as I mentioned, this is the platform team repository. The application team themselves, where they're going to spend the majority of their time is in the application code itself, right? So they're going to be looking at, here's the application logic that I need to build. Here's my Docker image where I'm kind of defining the application logic. In this case, it's a pretty straightforward file. We've basically got an Nginx container that's pulling our static HTML file out into this environment. What's happened behind the scenes here is that we've gone ahead, the Akuity platform has created all the assets that this team needs in order to deploy their assets. So let me pull over another window quick. I've set up in our Argo CD instance an application set that is basically looking at these repositories. And we can quickly see that it is basically responsible for spinning up applications in this environment. It's currently spun up for those applications. And one of those applications is our tissue app set here. What that's done behind the scenes is spun up a project where we've containerized all our permissions for this application team, along with individual applications for their environment. We've given them a staging, a dev, a production environment, and we've also set up a cargo pipeline for them. This cargo pipeline has defined the key stages of their promotion process, right? So they've got a dev stage, staging, a prod stage. We've identified how they can safely move through these different environments within their account. We can quickly jump over to what that cargo pipeline looks like. I should have a tissue app here. And we can actually see, so look, it detected automatically from Docker that we've pushed an image out there. It's automatically deployed that to my dev environment for me. I can see that that application is healthy out my dev environment. And that means if I go to this URL right here and refresh, it's going to take a minute to think. Hello, Acuity. So here, this is the exact file from that platform team's repository as a Docker image running out in this environment. I didn't have to bug the platform team as an application developer. As a platform team, I wasn't deluged with service tickets in order to get this configured for the team. And I think we're about 4 minutes here. We were able to get this up and running for the application team in a self-service manner. We'll go ahead in this cargo pipeline. I mentioned, this dev version you can see with the lightning bolt, it was an automatic promotion. Anytime we cut a new image, it will promote that out for us. We can also do things like manual promotions. So if I try and promote this out to my staging environment, I can go ahead and do that here, where it's going to clone my repository. It's going to use Helm template to actually generate the manifest that should be pushed to that Kubernetes environment. It's going to go ahead and commit that change to a Git repository on an app-specific branch, and then the Argo CD know that it needs to sync that change out to that particular environment. And so just as we saw with our dev branch, now my staging environment is going through this process of verifying that the deployment was successful. So not only do we notify Argo CD that there's changes in this environment that it needs to run with, and you can see that being created in the resource tree. My staging environment is creating a rollout or a deployment. I've got ingress controllers, I've got services, I've got replica sets being spun up, some analysis jobs. Because we have an ingress controller, we need some secrets to set up SSL for this client effectively. And all this is being handled for the application team without them having to be experts in the Kubernetes environment. And we can see that Cargo is actually going to wait for those resources to come up healthy before it marks this environment as healthy. And it won't let downstream stages proceed until we've verified those upstream environments. So that was, again, high level window of what we're unlocking for the application team. Now I'd like to kind of do a deeper pass. Oh, and by the way, because we deployed that staging environment, I should be able to load here. Staging. My tissue application is now out in that staging environment as well. So again, from an application standpoint, really quick for me to get to all the environments I need as defined by the platform team without any service tickets and full control over exactly what that looks like. I want to take a step back now, and we're going to do a deeper dive with that initial conversation out of the window. So we've seen our finished cake. Let's talk about how we made that happen. We're looking at the Cargo UI today. This is probably where most of your application developers are going to spend a lot of their time, or at least where they're going to start a particular activity. The top line here is what we call freight. Freight is basically the box of stuff that we're going to promote across different stages and environments. And so you can see, we have a number of subscriptions, we call them, for these freight objects. We're concatenating the concerns of there's probably some sort of Docker image or container image that you want to deploy out there, but that image alone isn't enough. There's probably some configuration that goes along with it. And so we're going to capture all those things at a point in time, grab a snapshot of it, and box that up as what we call freight. That freight then is, collected and stored in the warehouse, which is this box here, until it's ready to be promoted. Dev, as we saw, is automatically promoting anytime changes get kicked out into that environment. And the individual stages define what that promotion process looks like. And we took a quick walkthrough of that, right? We're doing a clone of a repository. We're doing some templating activity. I'm using Helm in my demo. It could be customized. It could be direct YAML manipulation of underlying manifest. That's really up to each individual organization to decide. And then we push that back to our repositories for Argo CD to sync in each environment. These stages are defined kind of in a reference where they depend on each other. So again, staging won't be allowed to proceed until your dev environment is successful. Prod won't be allowed to proceed until staging is successful. And it works down this process. Speaking of prod, I said we were going to go from zero to prod in a couple minutes, and we haven't even touched prod yet. So let's go ahead and do that promotion into our prod environment. Now, prod introduces some additional steps that we weren't doing in our dev and staging environment, and specifically that's around promotion. Many organizations are not at the maturity or standpoint yet that they want to just let changes fly directly into their production environments and have some sort of gating or approval in place. So for that, I'm going to pull over to Slack really quickly. And here I've got a demo Slack instance, and there's a channel with Cargo notifications. And you can see that I don't need to be in Cargo as the manager or as a team lead or as a platform team approving it. I can actually automatically get this notification in Slack that, hey, we've got a deployment to prod. They're trying to push up version 2, and that needs your attention. And it links directly to that pull request here. We can see also on the Cargo side, it's waiting. It's not going to proceed for that update until someone gives this application approval in that Git repository pull request. And we can also see Cargo is linking directly to that pull request here. So from either place, I can go ahead and open up the pull request. Because of the approach we're using here, which is called the rendered manifest pattern, we're basically committing the the fully defined manifest of exactly what goes into these environments. So it's not the Helm values, it's not the overlays. I can see full in, this is exactly what the Kubernetes API is going to receive. That's great for debugging, traceability, and a level of clarity that can be difficult to do with, kind of partial rendered templates in there. In this case, we're going to go ahead and approve this pull request. Everything looks good. Let that fly into our prod environment. Only now that someone has approved this pull request in GitHub are we going to see that this step, which was, waiting on a pull request, I'll give it a quick refresh here, has detected that pull request, in fact, has been merged. And so we're good to sync this change over to Argo CD. While this deployment is running in Argo, I want to show you another cool thing that we can do. This freight was created automatically for me, and I can see where it's been. Version 2 has currently been in dev, staging a prod by this color coding. I can also get that, visually here, I can see version 2 is currently in all my different environments. You can also create freight dynamically. So there could be situations where, we want the previous version of the Docker image, but we want to take the latest version of our configuration. So these two things kind of happen at a point in time, and we decide, well, one of them was good and one of them wasn't. And so we can actually mix and match those underlying subscriptions of my freight object and create new freight. And we saw that just happen here. So I'm using my previous version of Docker, but that latest git commit 0e is the same across both of these. So again, a freight object is capturing those multiple subscriptions as a single object. I'm going to go ahead and promote that to the dev environment automatically. And now we can see from our history panel here that actually dev is no longer running version 2. That was the last version. It's currently going back to that tag 1. The other thing on this page I want to show that's pretty interesting is as I go to try and promote directly out to prod, it's going to yell at me. Now, I'm an admin in my demo environment, so if I wanted to, I can overrule and approve this warning. But basically, it's telling me you said things need to go dev, staging, prod, and this thing hasn't been through your staging environment yet, right? So you're not allowed to put it up to prod directly. In a hotfix situation, maybe that's what you want to do, but in a lot of times it's not appropriate, and so we're going to block, so let's say, individual application teams or developers from doing that, and only folks with certain authority can do a hotfix type situation where we might allow this. Because we're deploying this version 1 out to my dev environment, we can jump over to Argo and see the status of this. And we can actually see it's doing a rollout for this environment. And so this application has started a new replica set next to my old replica set, and it's going through that rollout process. One nice thing about the Argo UI is I can actually see that rollout panel directly here. And so I can see that this new version of my application is currently serving about 20% of my traffic, and it's stopped for an analysis job. So more than just, hey, did the application start up? Are the resources healthy? What key business metrics are important to validate that this is actually having the impact we wanted in the environment, that we're not seeing a spike in error rates, or that we're not seeing a drop in, shopping cart checkouts, or whatever key business metrics are important for our situation. We're including that in what we consider a verification of this environment. And Cargo is going to wait for that verification to be completed before it allows us to proceed to downstream steps. The other really fun thing that we can do in a Argo environment is handle things like drift detection and remediation. So whether it happens through the Argo UI or maybe a platform engineer is working directly in the cluster with kubectl, they might incidentally delete some objects that are supposed to be in there, right? So there's a bunch of different things we've defined in this environment that are supposed to be there. If someone incidentally says, that I probably don't need that canary service, it's not doing anything important at this moment, and delete it, you saw how quickly their Argo CD detected, oops, that thing is supposed to be there, and a few seconds ago recreated that. So again, regardless of where that change is happening or comes from, Argo CD is constantly making sure that what you put in the Git repository as intended state is actually what's reflected out there in that environment. So we've talked about the Cargo workflow. We've taken our application all the way from a brand new repository, nothing existing. We've promoted it out to different environments. And in fact, if I now load my prod environment, we should see the same thing is out there. Hello, Acuity. That's great. We've talked about drift detection. The other thing we can do here as an application developer, maybe my pod's not behaving the way I expect it to, or something is just not the way I understand it should be. I can right here through Argo take a look at the logs. So we don't need to grant application teams kubectl access to the individual clusters. We can abstract that through the Argo CD interface, put the appropriate permissions. They're allowed to view only these resources, including logs, for their particular project or application space, not other people's projects, and only within their own space, and only to do things like view logs, not to make changes or other environment manipulation. So that's all from the developer experience. I also want to kind of take a look at this from the platform team experience. And so for that, I'm going to start back on this overall application panel. One nice thing here is from a platform engineering standpoint, I can see all my different clusters, all my different environments at a single glance, and I can see the state of those things. So we're actually in a pretty good situation right now. All my resources are healthy and most of them are in sync. It looks like I've got a couple applications that are not in the intended state from the Git repository, but the good news is at least they're healthy. And so I can see that at a glance of some of these charts. And I can also drill into individual applications and see the details for any of these assets across my environments. I talked in the kind of developer workflow that they were only allowed to manipulate a few key values, right? We basically gave them this app values file and said, hey, application team, don't worry about how we run it in the environment. You just let us know, what port you want, how much memory and CPU you need, and we, the platform team, will take care of the rest for you, right? Now, obviously, somewhere along the way, there is Kubernetes manifests that need to be defined. And we can actually see in our cargo pipeline here that we're pulling from two different warehouses. And I didn't talk about this bottom warehouse yet. This is where we're actually pulling in those underlying templates defined by our platform team. So if I look at this repository, this is separate from the application team repository. So now this represents a repository that's owned by our platform team, and we've defined a chart in here for applications. And so this is a Helm chart here for our app teams. Those familiar with Helm, there's a basic concept of templates that we look at. And here's where we define those resources we saw in the Argo UI. There was a rollout definition, there was services, there was ingress. We'll pick on this ingress object. Obviously, it's not going to be the same for every team, right? And that's why we use the templating engine. We let them override things like what was the custom prefix that they wanted their app exposed at. In this demo instance, it was that random word tissue. We're going to configure what environment it is. Is it dev? Is it staging? Is it prod? And we're going to control the root domain. In this case, my demo links app. And we're automatically going to provision a, SSL certificate for them behind the scenes. So application teams don't need to understand this or configure this or maintain it. But at promotion time, we'll take our centrally defined templates, we'll merge it with the application team's defined logic and configuration values, and push those things together through our environment. Now, as teams are going through this process, promoting changes day in and day out, inevitably someone from the leadership team is going to come to us and ask, how is the team performing? And that's an area that we can take advantage of some of the metrics built into our platform. So if I go to the Akuity portal, this is where we manage all the different Argo and Kargo instances. Take a look at my demo org. On the promote side, I can pull up my DORA metrics tab. So really quickly, we know when the commit was made, we know when the deployment was made and how long it took after the commit. We can see whether those deployments were successful or not, and we can see how long it took to remediate from a failed deployment. Those are the DORA metrics, right? So in a single dashboard here, I can visualize the metrics for an entire organization. 12 changes a day, that's great. I think a really good pace. We're able to make those changes start to finish within a couple days, pretty good. But we're seeing a failure rate of 40%. One and or half of almost all the changes we're making are failing, and that's a pretty concerning rate. So that's something we want to dive into as a team. We can also drill this down into specific teams that we're curious about looking at or particular environments, right? So if I only care about looking at this in different prod environments, I can isolate this data set to let's look at prod deployments and see, significantly lower throughput, which makes sense. A lot of changes are happening in lower environments that don't reach prod. We still have that significant error rate. So some really good details here that your platform teams can act on and provide that visibility to your business stakeholders, your executive audience, and QA teams that want to improve performance over time. We also have an auditability concern. And that was one of the top pieces of feedback there was that, attestation ability. And so we can, from our organization tab, look at our audit log, and we can see this across the entire organization, right? So it doesn't matter what Argo instance or what Kargo instance or what cluster or what environment, I've got a centralized audit log for all the activities happening across my organization. And I can have some really nice filtering based in, so I can see, who the specific actors were. I can filter down on particular activities. I only care about promotions, or I only care about a particular resource that was being manipulated in my clusters. And I can also export all of this to an external system. And it's not just the actor and the object. We give you a really deep level of visibility here, right? So we can see, for instance, Eddie did this prod promotion earlier on. I can click the little details tab here and get a whole rich set of information about here's the exact application they promoted, the freight object that went along with that, including the git commit hashes and the image version that went out there. So again, really granular, very detailed audit logs that we're capturing to make any GRC team happy. As far as the platform engineering roles, giving you that oversight of the platform overall, giving you deep auditability, key DORA metrics, templatize those patterns centrally, enabling application teams to still deploy in a self-service model and give them just the right level of access they need to the cluster without direct access and exposing that risk significantly to the organization. I mentioned at the start, it was one of the key challenges we talked about was supporting non-containerized workloads, right? So it's often common, and we had this conversation with a lot of our customers, is, we love what Kargo is doing with Argo for Kubernetes workloads, but we've still got this big Terraform footprint in the organization, right? The underlying infrastructure, our VMs, our cloud providers, we still have to do Terraform that. What can you do for that problem for us? And it's really exciting that now Acuity can solve that problem for non-containerized workloads. So if you're using Terraform to provision underlying infrastructure, common examples might be you need an S3 bucket or an RDS database, or there's some IAM identity profiles that are important for your, containerized workloads to do the job that they need to do. You can integrate that directly into your cargo pipeline. So you can take a quick look at what that looks like here. I've got a project set up in Cargo here. What you notice it's got an additional subscription object. On top of listening to a Docker registry and app config, we're also looking at a Lambda function coming from our AWS environment. And if I deep dive into what my specific deployment activities look like, here I'm cloning my repository still. Instead of using Helm template, I'm doing a direct YAML update. So I mentioned you don't have to use Helm. In this case, we're just taking the version from our freight and sticking it directly into a specific path within our YAML file. But as far as the Terraform workload goes, we actually give you there's actually three dedicated steps we give you around Terraform plan, apply, and output. And so you can see as part of this workflow, we're running Terraform apply, making sure that that resource is in the environment. Then we can use Terraform output to say, hey, go ahead and get me from this module the output. So I can, for instance, in this case, understand where that Lambda URL is. So I can put that Lambda URL into my containerized workload manifest. I need to inject this into my container as a variable so that it knows how to talk to its backend services, and then go ahead and push that up to Git. So there with this example, we're showing you how you can integrate those concerns across Terraform containerized workloads. In the future, working on things like Ansible for virtual machines, running arbitrary Docker commands, containerized workloads as part of your promotion process, really giving you this comprehensive and tightly integrated promotion solution for your ecosystem. The next thing, I want to chat about is Akuity Intelligence. So at the start, I mentioned, more than just the open source offering of Argo, we've got a security and scale that is unmatched due to our unique architecture. We've got some unique enterprise capabilities in our Cargo offering as far as integrating with change management systems and elsewhere. But a big key value of the Akuity platform is our Akuity Intelligence agents. And there's three key agents that we offer. Our deployment advisor, which is letting individual developers or platform engineers interact with AI and ask questions or take action in their Kubernetes environments. We have the on-call agent, which is automatically doing incident detection and remediation for you. And we have our promotion advisor, which is actually helping you before you make changes to an environment, understand the potential impact of those changes. And so to demo this, I'm actually going to go back to my application team repository. And we're going to make a quick change here. I'm going to open up my index file. So now, again, I'm wearing the hat as a application developer here, and I'm going to change that title from Hello Acuity to Hello AKI. As I showed in my earlier visual, CI is still part of your process. So we're still going to depend on a CI process to build and effectively test our artifacts, make sure that it's meeting the core business logic that we've defined appropriate for this organization, and publish that new asset in the environment. And as you can see, it's building version number 3 here. This will take just a second on the GitHub Actions side to push that new container out to the environment. And it looks like it's completed that. So now if I go back to my Cargo workflow, by the way, you can set up webhooks for this so that you don't have to do the refresh. By default, the polling interval is about 5 minutes, but we can see it detected that new version of the application, version 3. As before, it's automatically deploying that out to my dev environment. Great. But when you do a manual to promotion, that's where, and we'll override this, that's where our promotion advisor comes into play. And this is really cool. So what the promotion advisor is going to do is it's going to look at what is currently deployed in that environment. What is the Git commit that's responsible for that environment? What is the freight that you're trying to deploy into that environment currently? What's the Git commit behind that? And let me do a delta or a comparison of these two. What is actually the difference in code and configuration that we're introducing this environment? And based on that difference, what is the risk level? What's the scope of change that you're introducing? You can see in this case, it's determined that this is a safe deployment. It's a low risk. Why is it a low risk? Well, because it's only one commit, it's only one file that changed. And like you saw, the only change we're doing is changing a greeting from Hello Acuity to Hello AKI. And so it calls out, as far as deployment risks go, this is pretty minimal. You're not changing application logic. You're not changing any substantial functionality. You're just changing a little bit of paint on the application. So it's flagging this as a low risk. Go ahead and proceed with that promotion, feeling confident you understand the scope, the complexity, and the risk of this deployment before introducing it into that environment. So that's great, before we make those changes, getting that level of confidence and making sure that we're not going to break a bunch of stuff with the promotion. Sometimes we miss that or things just don't behave the way that we expect and things still go wrong in a runtime environment. And so let's take a look at how our on-call agent can help us with that. I've got another application out here. It's called our app because that's intentionally what it's going to do. I can see right now it's in a healthy state, but I also notice it's out of sync. So being a good, platform engineer, I know this, we want to be in sync with our repository. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger a sync job to run. So this is going to go out to the Git repo, say, hey, what's the intended state? It's going to start that replica setup. Oh, it crashed. It's starting it up again. Oh, it crashed. And now this application is in a degraded state. Just as before, we can look at the details of that and see why is this application, this particular pod in a degraded state. It's because it's getting an killed issue, right? So this application is running out of memory. We can also see as far as events go, that thrashing that it's doing, right? It's going through this loop of trying to start it up and crash back off because it can't start it up for the container, trying to start up a new one. And so this environment is thrashing. It's not delivering the value we need. Akuity Intelligence detected that and it automatically opened up an incident for us. Let's take a look at what the incident is doing. Without me having involved myself at all with this, it automatically started doing a level of triage for me. So it went out there and researched the application tree, what's the state of all these Kubernetes resources, and then you can see it's firing off messages to our Slack instance. And so in Slack, we have this incidents channel. I don't need to be monitoring Acuity. It's going to come out and notify me in Slack. Hey, you've got an incident running in your environment. I've done some triaging for you. Here's the exact context of this incident in full detail, the thought process, everything we're going through. And by the way, where we're at right now is it looks like you're running out of memory. And so, what I would like to do is basically patch this environment, change it from 128 megabytes of memory to 178. We think that will kind of fix the issue we're having. I see that same conversation happening here in Acuity. So whether I'm in Acuity side or in the Slack instance, it's basically saying, hey, I've done all the triage. Here's what I think the appropriate remediation is for this environment. And not only can we read it from Slack, but we can actually go ahead and interact with it from Slack. So I'll say proceed with patch. The analysis you've done is great. Go ahead and apply that to the environment for me. And we're going to pick that up from the Acuity side. And you can see already the application is changed to a healthy state in this environment because it applied that Kubernetes patch for me, raising the memory limit of this container. It's then going to monitor this application and make sure that it stays in the healthy state, doesn't crash and go back into that degraded state again. Now, it's important to note, this application isn't running with like totally unfettered AI access in the environment, do whatever you want. The interaction you saw here was all based on a runbook assigned to this environment. And then it just automatically closed out the incident for me. And if we go to Slack quickly, it should tell me, hey, I resolved the incident for you because everything was groovy. I mentioned this came from a dedicated runbook, and that's something that is defined by your platform team. So we can come to our Akuity Intelligence portal here and look at the runbook I defined for out-of-memory errors. We said only apply it to these applications, these namespaces, these clusters. By the way, here's the channel that you should communicate with the team in Slack. And here's the explicit instructions I want you to run with. Now for this demo, I said, go ahead and patch it as long as you get approval. And I made that explicit. You need to get approval from the team in order to apply these patches. You might also decide, I don't even want you to apply anything. I just want you to do the initial triaging and investigation. Or we had a customer that went further and they were having an issue with cert management where expired certs weren't properly getting replaced by their provider. And in that case, they said, just fix it for us, right? If you see a cert that is expired because of an invalid signing authority or whatever it might be, just go ahead and remediate that, delete the old CRA and get a new one issued to recover from that. I don't even want you to wait or depend on human intervention. And again, you can scope that to what particular clusters, environments, or namespaces are appropriate. There could be some applications you want that automated remediation, and some applications that are higher risk that you want to make sure a human gets involved in that review and approval process. I've only got one really simple runbook here. It's worth noting we've got a repository full of different runbooks that we've collected from various use cases. You can automatically import those into Akuity Intelligence and then tweak and tune them to meet your individual needs. We've also got the concept of tasks. Tasks are just like runbooks, except they're not waiting on an incident to occur. They're happening on a scheduled basis. So you can define what activities do I want Acuity Intelligence to do on some regular basis in my environment. I've got two really simple examples here. We're seeing killed issues. I want you to give me a weekly report of what that's happening. How bad is this issue, this recurring problem in my environment? Do I want to do more than just having that runbook in place? And then also analyzing things like resource utilization, right? How many apps do I have that are maybe under or over provisioned in the environment? Go out and do some assessment based on the requests and their actual footprint. The third, so that's we've looked at our promotion advisor before you make changes, get an understanding of that scope and risk. We've looked at our on-call agent, so as bad things happen in the environment, automatically remediate from those challenges. The other area is our deployment advisor. And so this is something that teams can use kind of on an ongoing basis. So if I go back to one of my applications here, we'll pick on it in the dev environment. Now, if I'm familiar with Kubernetes objects, I can kind of navigate this tree and see how the ingress controllers and services and everything else are impacting it. And I can look at the fancy network view and see how traffic is throwing. But maybe I'm not familiar with that stuff. I'm not a Kubernetes expert. I generally know networking, but especially in Kubernetes, it's a little bit beyond my head. I can go ahead and just ask my AI agent here, is 100% of traffic reaching my latest version? And just like with an incident, it can both be assessment and action. So I can ask questions of the AI bot, hey, go ahead and do an assessment for me. It's going to research the application tree, understand what we've defined in the Git repository, what the current state of that environment is, and come back with that answer for me. And if needed, I can even prompt it to do specific remediation for me. So in this case, it's telling me like, hey, good news, your stable service is pointing to the same version as your canary service, which is version 3 of your application. Both of your ingress controllers route to this. There's no traffic splitting or anything mucking with that. The conclusion here, yep, 100% of your traffic is going to the latest version. So great, as a platform or sorry, app developer, I don't need that deep knowledge or expertise in particular resources here. I can just have this helpful conversation. This is also really good for if pods are crashing. Why is my pod crashing? It will look at the logs, it will look at the intended state, give your app developers the answer they need without having to come back and bug the central platform team with questions and challenges that they have. So those are the three key AI agents we offer as part of Acuity Intelligence. But we also give you this really awesome intelligence dashboard. And there's a ton of really important insights and information that you can get from this dashboard that I just want to spend a couple minutes on. We talked about incidents and how we can define our runbooks and tasks there. We also have the ability, and that's the incident we looked at was basically we under provisioned our resource. We were using more memory than we asked for in the thing. Another really common challenge we see customers deal with is over-provisioned resources, right? Every single app developer says, I need half a gig of memory and I need 100 CPUs for my application. Go ahead and throw everything you got at it. But the reality is it doesn't compute that much in the environment. And so we've got a lot of challenges where applications are, setting limits way higher than they need. And as a result, we're over-provisioned in our total cluster capacity. So I can come right to this dashboard here and let's go ahead and just sort by memory descending. And so, okay, here's what the application requested for its resource limit. It says it needs half a gig of memory, but in reality, it's using 227. Okay, maybe that's not so bad. This application said I need half a gig of memory and it's only using 40 megabytes, right? So this is an opportunity. Let me go have a conversation with this application team. Can we drop that number down to something closer to your actual usage? So this is really important insight that can help. That can also be useful for understanding this kind of challenge again of how am I over provisioned in my environment. I can see my clusters, the different nodes of my clusters, how they're split across my availability zones. That in itself is a useful little view. But I can also see the utilization of these resources. And green, typically associated with good, actually in this case is a problem because I'm only using 6 and 8% of my CPU capacity, right? So these nodes are way over provisioned. I'm paying a bigger AWS bill than I need to for this cluster footprint. We should be able to get this down. I can also look at namespace utilization. So who are the big spenders in my environment? Well, not surprising that intentional app that we were looking at is one of our big offenders in this demo cluster. It's using up a lot of CPU and memory. We can go have a conversation with the application team about how they can potentially reduce their footprint and spend in this environment. We can also look at CVEs. So of course you're doing scanning of your applications as they go through your build process at CI time, but new vulnerabilities are being discovered every day. So we can also run a scan in the background for you on all your managed workloads, all your different clusters, and identify, have any new vulnerabilities been identified that are affecting your workloads and your environment. And sure enough, for one of these demo applications here, my rollout app, I can see that there's a number of vulnerabilities, three critical ones, in fact, affecting a rather old version of Golang. It tells me not only the affected version, but where I need to jump to in order to mitigate this vulnerability. So go have a conversation with this team and say, hey, go ahead, rev to version 122, and you should be all set and address three major vulnerabilities in your environment. Another challenge we see is, platform teams, you want to stay on top of your Kubernetes version, but you want to make sure you don't break anyone in the process. And we actually see a lot of organizations that are on pretty outdated versions of Kubernetes because they're afraid they're going to break applications if they upgrade too quickly. So we have this deprecated APIs panel. Well, we're currently running 134 in our environment. And we know that we have some APIs that are being deprecated as we move to 138. Now, the good news, no resources in our environment are using those. So here now as a platform team, I have full confidence I can upgrade our Kubernetes environment and we're not going to break any applications. Not only do we identify the standard APIs for you, but as a platform team, you can also come in here and identify your own APIs that you want to mark as deprecated within your environment and get a report on, who's using that and who you need to follow up with. There's additional views you can look at here, any resources that are stuck in deletion, how your objects and total resources in the environment, how pods are being distributed, what images are being used. But the point here is that this is happening across all your clusters, all your environments, all your applications in a single pane of glass here. You have that visibility to understand and take action as needed on top of these AI agents that we're giving you in the environment. Coming to a close here and we'll switch it over to some Q&A, but I just want to make the point here that why Akuity Intelligence is different than other solutions out there, especially, some automated SRE solutions out there in the environment. One is our level of access. So, enriching the native Kubernetes RBAC model, we have the understanding of who the user is, what the resource is, and what the appropriate level of permission or access is. So you can define based on that resource, based on the user, based on the situation, what level of action or investigation can take place. Again, it's not unfettered control for those AI bots in the environment. Context is the other really big aspect here. We're not just looking at logs. We have the intended get status. We have the application resource tree. We have access to the managed clusters and the Kubernetes API on top of the logs. And so we have the full picture of exactly what is should be and what actually is in that environment and can give you the deeper insights needed to remediate those problems. And it is actionable. Again, because we are managing those clusters and workloads, we can stop it giving you advice if that's what you prefer, but we can also take it further and actually automatically apply the remediation for you through the Argo UI and through the Kubernetes API that we're dealing with. So that really, as far as Akuity Intelligence, it makes us stand out in what we're offering you to quickly remediate and operate day two and beyond. I know we've covered a ton of information in the past 50 minutes, kind of a whirlwind tour of what the Akuity platform can offer. And honestly, we just scratched the surface. If you're interested in diving deeper and speaking more specifically to your individual challenges, I'd love for you to scan that QR code or visit our site, akuity.io. We can schedule a tailored demo for you. We can get nitty-gritty on exactly what is unique to your situation and what's affecting you and answer any questions that you have in ways that a Akuity platform, our promotion engine, our deployment engine, and those AI-powered insights can help you solve that challenge of being, better, faster, cheaper across the entire organization.